Welcome everybody, I'm Kathy Jack. I'm president of the Historical Society. Thank you for joining us this evening. You know, it's said that the sense of smell is a sense of all the senses triggers more memories than any of our other senses. And any residents that grew up in Grove City grew up with the smell of roasted nuts and coffee. And you know, it's a very fond memory to have. And still to this day, when you're walking the streets of Grove City, you can smell that wonderful smell. When George Howe came to Grove City with his family in 1917 and set up a little grocery store, little did he know that 100 years later it would be not only nationally known, but internationally known worldwide. So I'm very pleased today to have with us Dick Beech, CEO and grandson of George J. Howe, to share with us the history of the family's company.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I really appreciate the opportunity to talk when I got called a number of months ago. And normally, you know how it is when you look at your calendar, it's open, and then the day starts growing closer and closer. And my wife and I went to the movie Saturday night down here, which, by the way, is a great movie called Imagine. If you haven't seen it, trust me, it is a wonderful, wonderful movie. It really is for all ages. Go see it. But we were walking by here to get to the car, and I said, you know, I better start preparing for my talk on it. and I laughed, and I said that in some respects I've been preparing for this for over 50 years. I can remember as a little boy walking, playing out at the Howe Company as a child, and not my grandfather died by then, but my dad and other family members, and I never really thought about that I would go into the business. I went away to college in Virginia, worked for several years in the banking business, and then through a sequence of events decided I want to come home and got into the family business. And in February, it's been 35 years that I've been back, so I've earned some of these gray hairs. I'm going to give you a little handout in just a second, but first, just to get started with a little bit of fun, who can tell me what year the Howe Company was founded? I want a hand. Who can tell me? Yes.
I heard her say 1917.
It's wrong.
That's what that paper says.
1927.
1927. There's a winner. All right. Okay. And let's see. This is a tougher one. I got two more. Well, you got to answer one of two. What does the J in George J stand for? It's in here, but I can't. That's why I didn't want to give you this first.
For the quiz.
Anybody else?
John?
James.
Let's say Jerome.
What was that?
Jeffrey. Something.
No.
Jefferson.
Jennings.
Oh.
So it's funny, George J. Howe, so no one gets that one. Last one, see if someone could get this. How many children did George J. Howe have? Not a trick question.
Three that I can think of.
4.
Who said 4?
I did.
Thank you.
You'll know why in a second. I tell everybody 3, but you'll know why that's not the accurate answer. Let me hand these out to you. Can you help me? And if I would, I'm going to be, I don't know if any of you are former teachers, but do me a favor, don't look ahead. You know, I did this in lieu of a PowerPoint so that you'd have that. So there may, I don't know if I have enough. I should come close. And if not, if a couple of you can share, you know, and please do share and stuff. How many we got? Here's another one. Who else needs some? I've got 3 more. Who doesn't have one? Okay. You got? Is there an extra there? No, that's okay. I got enough now. Looks like I have enough. Who doesn't have one on their own? Anybody else doesn't have one? Okay. No looking ahead. No looking ahead. What's going to happen is we'll have a quiz at the end of this. I talked to our controller. We decided between 2 gifts for the winner of the quiz, a new Mercedes, or you get to volunteer here at the Historical Society. Our budget allowed for the second one. So that's what we're going to do. So open the first page, and listen, my goal here really is to not drag this on at all. You know, my mother, some of you knew my mother, Pauline Beech, and she was a great lady. And she always told me that she never had someone come up to a speaker afterward and say, you know, you didn't talk long enough. And I've always remembered my mother's wisdom in that. And so my goal tonight is not to bore you. It's to kind of go through this at a fairly reasonable pace and then ask any questions and then be done. So, and by the way, I had cataract surgery in the last month, so I'm going back and forth now. My vision is good in the distance, but I'm having to do this with cheaters. So anyway, first page is George J. Howe and Mary Rebecca Thompson. They were married on October 23rd in Clarion, PA, and that's where Mr. Howe was from originally. And there were 8 or 9 family members, and this is where I wish my sister Becky were here. She's actually got more of a history than I do about our family, but they were all kind of cerebral type, meaning they were very good educationally, and that's the kind of family he came from. But they were from, there's some books even up on the Clarion River where they did some logging and stuff. There may even be a book around here about that. It's kind of interesting. Okay, second page is they had 4 children, and this is the thing. They had Jennings passed away as an infant, and I'm not prepared to tell you what infant meant. I don't know if at time of birth, again, I need to talk to Becky about that. So this is, I always say that he had 3 children. My Aunt Ruth, and then my mom Pauline, and then my Uncle Dick, who I'm named after. He was killed in World War II at the age of 28. And interestingly enough, he died on September 15th, 1944, which was my wife's birthday, which is kind of tying things together. And the time he left, he was married, and this is where I think it's worthwhile tying some of this into the Historical Society. Dolores, his wife was Dolores Hubbs. Okay? Okay, and then after Dick died, she remarried 5 years later and married Blaine Hubbs, who for many years had Hubbs Trucking and Milk Transport. Of course, both Dolores and Blaine are now deceased. So growing up, that's all I knew was Aunt Dolores and Uncle Blaine, even though it was through that marriage. They did have one son by the name of George Howe. And George Howe is still living and still works. I would say George is probably in his mid-70s, has worked at the University of Louisville in Kentucky for over 40 years. And they've actually been there so long they named a little building after him, George J. Howe Red Barn. He's in student services, so he is still living there. The other thing I want to tell you about the death of my uncle is this. My grandfather understandably took that very hard. You know, Dick was one he'd hoped to come back and maybe go into business and work in the family business. And my grandfather really took that hard, and I understand. I mean, I don't understand what it would be like, but I too have 2 daughters and a son, and I can't imagine how hard that is, or if any of you have lost a child, the tragedy of that. And he took it hard. He soldiered on, but he took it hard. My grandmother also took it hard, but she had an interesting way of dealing with it because I come from a family of believers. That faith has been passed on, and we've claimed Christ as our own throughout many generations. But my grandmother actually used that as a time. She wrote every other mother in Mercer County who had lost a son in the war. That was her way of giving back, and that's what she did. And that was, that still almost brings a tear to my eye when I think of the story of what she did to reach out. Okay, next page is Howe's Market. That was in 1917. That was the impetus. And you can read here on the side where he gave away a pound of coffee if you bought $10 worth of groceries. That was a springboard to him getting in the coffee business. That went so well, that's when he sold the store and started roasting coffee because of that, call it a modern day marketing gimmick or whatever. That's literally what happened. And this store, I am 99% sure, is right now where the alley is on this side of the tracks across from Ithan's Printing, Ithan Global. I think where that alley is that goes back and turns, I think that's where this store was. Actually, you guys who do this for a living, you can let me know if that's accurate or not. There's a store right beside that that's still there, but I don't know what that store is. You know, what's that?
Is that where the new bakery is?
Yes, I think the bakery is, but this store was right beside it, and it was called, I think, Howe's Market is what it was actually called. Now, there's a picture on that page By the way, I thank my daughter Rachel back here who's streaming this via Facebook. She put this together for me, so I thank you. I should have introduced Rachel, by the way, but I'll get to her toward the end when I tell you a little bit more about my family. But in this picture on the right, see the three things at the top that look like white lights? Who can tell me what those are? String. That's exactly right. I ask folks who are a bit younger than you and they don't know. But in those days, you could think about that string coming down and that's how they wrap the stuff in the store. And a lot of people don't know that. That's exactly what those were. Okay, next page. This was when we opened the building and our plant is still there. You can see in that top, that building is still there. In fact, I was up in one of the areas today where we're doing some fixing up, and we had a local contractor there, and he said, man, is this thing built? And I mean, the way and I don't know anything about contracting, but he knows how things are off center of the wood, and he said they knew how to build buildings. Interestingly enough, I went back and researched, because it's in our front area, that building was 25,000 square feet. And it was I think 90 by 40 or something, and then 2 stories. There were 2 floors on it, but it was $3.30 a square to build it. And now you build a home for about $150 a square, depending on what you're doing. But $3.36 a square to build that building, and that was in 1931. And since that time, we added, if you're standing on Main Street, to the right of it in the 50s. And then another one in the 70s, and then another one back in the 80s, and then we added a garage area, I think, in the 90s, and then we bought a distribution center. I jokingly tell some people, I don't know what would matter with Mr. Howe, because why didn't he have foresight to buy more land back in 1930? You know, because we got landlocked. And the next page is just another picture of, look to the pinner, winter picture, and the old trucks in front of the building. And I often think there's some, I don't know if Rachel, I don't think she included this one, maybe back there with the ones, Rachel, where they all line up and they almost look like they're a mob or something like that. They're all, lined up where their shotguns are and stuff. But that's a great picture. And the next page is past presidents. Funny thing is, when I was reviewing this, I looked at, because Rachel had these done for me, but they were paper clipped, and I thought, I'm going to staple them. Okay, so if you'll notice on the cover is Mr. Howe's picture, and so as I was stapling 30 of these things together, I go through. And I'm telling you, this is a true story. This is the first time I realized he was a lot younger than I thought he was, and I think that's because I've gotten older. Because when you're 25 and you look at, what an old guy that is. And now that I'm this age, I look and said, wow, he looked pretty good there. And I think that's because I've caught up to him. And so Mr. Howe was in 1950. My dad was 50 to 71. There's a little twist in there that I'll tell you about. A guy by the name of Bob Neely, who many of you may know. Bob was a president for 4 years. He was a longtime employee of the Howe Company. And then my brother-in-law, Ernie, who's married to my oldest sister, Becky, was president till 2007. And then when we reorganized, Ernie retired. I became the CEO, and actually a guy by the name of Dan Phillips, who many of you know became our president and chief operating officer. Dan retired about 3 years ago. Okay. And then the next page is Mrs. Howe. And here's what I can't figure out. She was officially president of the company when my grandfather died. And I'm not sure how that worked. I don't think she was active in the business as we would think it. And I'm not sure exactly what role she played, but she definitely held the title. And to what degree, I'm not sure. But she was officially on the record as president of the company for a while after my grandfather's death. He died of pancreatitis, I think. Not that you need to know that, but I thought I'd tell you. Okay, next page is my father. Typical canned picture. That room, I am almost positive, is now our quality control room, which you'll see later. And then we had the old coffee can in front of the building, old metal can, and I don't know what happened to that. And then another good story, that the fella down here pushing the cart, if you see that, okay, it's a guy by the name of Newt Robinson. And one of the things, Newt was from Mercer, and one of the stories that Newt would tell about when Mr. Howe hired him, he said, we'll give you a try. And he said, why don't we try this? Why don't you work here for 6 months and we'll see how things go. And Newt was fond of saying that he ended up being there for over 25 years. And someone told him, well, you know, hey, you're going to be 6 months. You made it 25 years. And they said, well, Newt, it took us 25 years to get 6 months work out of you. so I always like that. Okay, and the next page is an interesting, it's the same building, you know, as it pretty much stands today, and back in 1931. You can see we're expanded on to the right of it a little bit there. And then of course we've got new windows and all that, but structurally it's still in good shape. Next page is just some signs from the 80s to 2017. We actually we haven't officially started advertising a lot of our retail store, but because we don't necessarily want to compete with our own customers in town. But you know what, anymore it's so, market channels just crisscross each other that I'm thinking about actually buying a little menu sign to let people know we have a retail store, because we have a lot of people that go in there and say, I didn't even know this place existed. So we're probably going to try to get it on the map a little bit more. Next page. This is kind of a neat picture of the coffee cupping that we do in our company, with all at the same table. And again, they're all named. In the top left picture is my father, Mr. Neely, in the 50s. Top right, a younger me, and my brother-in-law in 2004. And then the bottom one was just taken last year. That's myself and my niece, Michaela, who is Ernie's daughter. And another connection is Michaela owned Beans on Broad for 7 years.
Oh.
Okay, so Michaela, who's my niece, owned Beans on Broad for 7 years. And then, but she's fond of saying when she bought Beans on Broad, she was single and didn't have any children. And when she sold it, she was married, had twins 2-year-old. So that's why she sold it. It was pretty much all encompassing. And so we needed somebody at our company to help us in the coffee end. And so it worked out for her so that she had a little bit more flexibility instead of being tied to the business. Okay, next page is coffee roasting. And I want to tell you something interesting about this. Picture on the left is Mike in the blue shirt. Mike's been with us probably 25 years. Coffee roasting itself, you could actually roast green coffee in a hot air popcorn popper if you wanted to do that. You could put green coffee beans. You better put it in your garage though, because it's going to smell and go off chaff. But the process has always been the same. You have to heat up roasted beans, and in this case you tumble them through a drum that circles around. It takes about 15 minutes for us to do 520 pounds. And so that process really hasn't changed. And I've been in a lot of plants around the country, and certainly there are some of the giant companies that have what they call continuous roasters, if you think about it, just spilling all through. But even a lot of the biggest companies have what they call batch roaster, large commercial sized batch roasters like the one that we use here. We also have a small roaster that does about 10 pounds that allows us to do isolated things like Kenyans or Costa Ricans that we don't have enough volume to be able to do that on a big basis. It would go stale on us, okay? But the process of roasting coffee hasn't changed. Now, the equipment has. There's different ways and all kinds of computerized things that tie in. As a matter of fact, there's a plant in the south that I'm very familiar with that does about 5 tractor trailer loads a day. And it's fascinating when I went through that plant to see how they convey all the green coffee. But when it gets to the roasting portion, it's still in a roaster with hot air applied. But when you're doing 50 million pounds a year like this company is, you have to have all the technology that can move coffee through the system. They're a very large commercial roaster. Okay, next page. That's my father, and that's Michaela cupping at the same table. That process hasn't changed, and that's a good thing. You literally slurp and expectorate coffee. I mean, it's fun when we bring people through who want to talk to us about coffee blends. It's fun. We'll get them around that table, and they have to get over the whole idea of slurping and spitting in a spittoon, but then it's a lot of fun. Coffee, people really love coffee. They enjoy it. And so we still do that today, and I will tell you, you could go into Starbucks, Maxwell House, you name it, and I could sit down at that table and cup coffee with them. You know, the way I describe coffee cupping is this. There's A to Z, and I could sit down with almost anyone in the country that does this, and I would not confuse an A with a Z or a B with a W But within ranges like BCD or XYZ, we would have differences of opinion, nuances that are within the beans. A lot of people compare it to like wine tasting, okay? And it's fun. That's the part of the people often ask me what I like most about the business, and that's when I came back to Howe's. I got involved in the coffee end. I still enjoy it, and that's the fun part of it, coffee tasting. Okay, next page. This is just our distribution center. That's a sign out there on Cranberry Road. If you flip the page, that is our distribution center. A couple pictures. Interesting thing how sort of the circle of life. This was the distribution center that my uncle Blaine owned, Hubbs Trucking, before they ran into some challenges and weren't able to sustain the business. And if you'll notice, if you go out on Cranberry Road, there's the truck terminal in the front of the place. We don't own that. And because what happened was there was a bankruptcy and a lot of the equipment sold, but the building did not sell. This building did not sell for various reasons, and it was tied up together and all that. And I ended up getting a call after quite a while. This was a number of years. Tim McNichol called me and said to me, "Dick, you're one of the few guys I know that think can put this deal together, you know, that might help you. It's not isolated. Can you do it?" And I still have the little Post-it note where I wrote down the number on it, and I said, "Tim, I think this is what we can afford to pay," because it was coming right in the heels of the Great Recession. And that was, I still tell people, when I was signing that thing, my hand was still shaking, thinking, what the heck are we doing here? But we ended up purchasing this building in, I probably spent half my time in the year 2010 putting this deal together, because we carved out that front building for some environmental concerns, and I had to piecemeal back the road, so I wanted to make sure we owned the access back there if we ever got into it and we weren't landlocked. So I put all that stuff together and had to go jump through more hoops than you want to know with all the legal stuff. But we secured this building in November of 2010. So what is that, seven and a half years ago? And we moved in the following September. And I don't have any inside pictures, but basically the structure is very, very well built. Doug Thomas built it back in the late 90s for Blaine, and it served us extremely well. So on our Main Street facility, that's where we package and produce the product, and then we shuttle truck it out to this facility, and that's where all the distribution takes place. Okay, and it's really helped us a lot. This building's probably about 50,000 square feet, and it's been a big saver for us. Okay, next page is just some more information about us. That is the picture on the left there with the table. That's our quality control room now. I think that's the same room where you saw my father pictured a few pages back. And in there we have quality control equipment that tests oxygen level and packaging, measures the color of coffee. We have to measure the grind of coffee and how it is. We cup coffee in there to make sure it passes quality control issues, that type of thing. And then there's just a picture of our mug and the front of our building. Although that picture, Rachel, now that I look at that, even, you know, where I'm going, we've even updated that a lot because of, we now have put some new shrubs and stuff. You know, I'm a guy, that could probably stay that way, but I have other people that have more of a touch for things, so we need to update that. So we did that a few years ago. Okay, next page are just some of the candy items, and this is significant because most people don't realize this. But candy now is 75% of our business. It is the large portion of our business. And part of that is because we just sort of gravitated that way. There's a lot more candy items that are sold, and I tell people that if you were doing a Harvard case study or Harvard Business School study, you wouldn't put together the Howe Company. We just made it work and adapt it as best we can. And it's very interesting in this day and age with Amazon and Walmart. And I mean, the retail world, I tell people, I've been here 35 years and I didn't think I'd be seeing what I was seeing even 10 or 15 years ago, let alone 35 years ago. I mean, the whole retail world is upside down. And that's okay, it's competition, but so candy is 75% of our business, and we have branded and unbranded products that we sell. We don't make any candy. Branded would be a caramel cream, a Tootsie Roll, an Atomic Fireball, a Blackjack Taffy, a Mary Jane. Unbranded would be a jelly bean, okay, a peach ring, a jelly like a spearmint leaf, all that. So we go out and source those, bring them in, and then package them in our own label and then redistribute them. Probably our signature item is jelly beans, and I think, I should have looked this up, but I'm thinking we sold about 22 tractor trailer loads of jelly beans, something like that. So, and they're an interesting item because it takes 7 days to make a jelly bean, and we have to project that back in June. And believe me, it's a cash flow nightmare. Any of you ever run your own business, good luck trying to figure out what the weather's going to be, what competition's going to be, when Easter falls. It is a blooming nightmare. Because you can, if we run short, I got the whole sales team just frustrated to beat band out of me. And if we run long, our controller's on me. So, it's just the way it goes. But it's jelly beans are probably single best category. The single best item we have, though, in our company, if you take one, what they call SKU, stock keeping unit. Anybody want to take a guess what it is? It's a candy item.
Caramel cream.
Caramel creams, absolutely. Getz caramel creams, yep. Made in Baltimore, Maryland. I know Mitchell Getz, good friend of mine who's, their company's 120 some years old, I think. It's a neat company. Okay, next page. Here, Walmart is a really big customer of ours, which has its pros and cons. But Walmart sells a tremendous amount of product. And you can see, here's two sets of Walmarts. The one on the right is this big four-way. The one on the left was out in Ohio somewhere where they actually called us, that region, to ask us to put some of this in. We sell about, Rach, do you even know, 250 Walmarts? Do you even know the last count? Maybe 300?
I think closer to 300.
Yeah, but it's only on a regional basis. If Walmart ever came to us and said, we want you to supply all of us, I might as well give you the keys to the company. We couldn't even come close to doing it. They sell a lot of product. So we sell them on a regional basis, and we are what we call rack jobbers. So if you go into a store and you'll see the bread guy, the milk guy, the little Debbie person, whoever it is, male or female, racking and stacking, that's what we do. We're a service company. The good news is that keeps us in a lot of locations. The bad news is it's a really expensive way to operate because you have a lot of capital tied up in trucks and transportation. But it enables us to be able to do something like this, which would be unheard of, frankly. And believe me, I've laid awake more than once at nights wondering if my phone's going to ring on certain things with calls I may not like. But I'll tell you, the product really sells. And the other interesting thing is, we use clear packaging. Now, I'd like to tell you that was a wonderful marketing strategy by Ernie and myself. It was just the least expensive way to do it. And we put labels on, but it's actually worked well because if you go into grocery stores today, almost everything is beautiful graphics. It looks like you could eat the film. I'm serious, you can. It's beautiful. But in this day and age where you'll hear the word transparency a lot, okay, and what's in it, we have said for years, I've said for years, this is a treat. Candy is not a meal replacement. It's not a full-time thing. It's a treat. That's what it's all about. Eat it in moderation. And so when you see this lined up, we think a lot of people buy with their eyes. So we think that the marketing still plays well for it. Okay, next page. I want to just tell you real briefly, this is an example before we had. This was a before and after. And you could see the difference. We had that's original wood floor in there, and after we got it all buffed up and cleaned up. And the reason I want to tell you this is, in the world of regulation, one of the things that we have just continued to spend a lot of money on is food safety. We constantly are investing back in the plant and the facility, and I could probably speak to you for 2 hours on food safety. It is, and I can tell you in the United States, by and large, there's a real emphasis on that. I can almost tell you there's more salmonella in people's kitchens than there are in factories around the country because we're really held to high standards and to what we do and some of the rules and regulations of the government and our customers. So we're constantly pulling money back into the company. Stuff that's common sense doesn't qualify. We now have to determine what we're going to do in food safety. We have to document meticulously what we're going to do. We have to do what we said we were going to do. We have to validate that we did what we said we were going to do, and then you have a fifth check to go back and check all those. So just reams and reams of paperwork. Again, a lot of it is good. I'm not an anti-regulation guy. Some of it I think goes a little bit overboard. I won't go into that, but I think overall it helps the industry overall for safety for all of us in the room. You know, that all the products we produce, I'm glad to have you folks eat. Sometimes I think some of the regulations that doesn't surprise most of you can kind of have you scratching your head, but overall it's a good thing. And we spend a lot, and food safety is a huge priority for us. Everyone in our company knows that if they get even a hint of anything, they can shut down the line, stop it, go to their supervisor, explain what the problem is until we can assess what is the issue and if we want to start the line or whatever we did. They're all grilled to that. Then the next page is our retail store, which I mentioned. Our retail store is actually where the original offices were, okay? And you can come in there if you haven't. This is your open invitation, Monday through Friday, 8 to 4, Saturdays 9 to 3, shop and browse, buy a lot, we take credit. Next page, back in November, even though we turned 90 in February, back in November, we have about 160 of us gathered out at the country club to celebrate 90 years in. I actually credit my daughter Rachel back here for that. She had come to me, I don't know, probably way back shortly after we had the 90th anniversary officially, and she said, "Dad, we're going to do something." And Rachel, and she said, "Dad, you know, we probably do this because is there any telling how many people of us may be around or the company may be around?" And I said, "You know, that's a good point." So she did a tremendous amount of work pulling this off, and it was a great evening for everyone. And I was glad we did. We have a lot of good memories from that, and a lot of our people came back, retirees, and enjoyed it. And next page, that is my sister, Becky, Ernie, and myself. I had glasses then, that was cataract surgery before. And that was taken at that night, and they honored us. Our employees gave us these nice framed plaques that we used. They came up with, and that was unbeknownst to us. We didn't know that. We really appreciate it from our employees. And last page, I think that's the last page. Yeah, last page. Let me just go through this real quickly because it is family. First of all, two people missing from this picture. One is my nephew, Rich May, Ernie and Becky's son, who does work for us. He works in transportation and purchasing. And then the other one is my son, Brady, who's not in this picture. He's working on his MBA, and he's in Florida coaching basketball at the college level as a graduate assistant working on his master's degree. And I think he may go into coaching. We don't know which way. Rachel and I are not sure what he's going to do, but we think he wants to be a coach. And then in here, if you go from left to right, left is Michaela, Ernie and Becky's daughter, my niece. Behind Michaela is Drew Vrabel, and Drew works at the George Jr., been out there about 8 years. Ernie, my brother-in-law, Becky, that's my wife, Laurie, me. That is the next young lady in there is my oldest daughter, Anna. She lives locally in Grove City, but she is the school psychologist at Shenango School District, down just south of Newcastle. She's the one school psychologist there for 1,200 students. Next is Corey, who is Rachel's husband, and Corey actually works for us as a route sales rep. But he's fond to tell everybody that he had his job and worked at Howe and was working his way up before he met Rachel and married Rachel. He's not there because he's part of the family now. And so I want to make sure to get that in. And then that's Rachel, who's back there now. Rachel is a graduate of Slippery Rock and then got her master's at Geneva College in Organizational Leadership. She does a lot of inside sales administration and has really been a big help to me. And then the young lady in front, that's Polly. That's Ernie and Becky's daughter, Polly, oldest daughter. And behind Polly is Eric Lynn. And Eric is, I see Lynn back there. And so you know that guy, don't you? And Eric owns Elephant and Castle, and also, plug for Eric, Blackout Burger, new restaurant that opened up just within the last week, right? And if you go, be careful what you order because you will get a lot of food, and it's great. So, and Eric's also been a good customer of ours for coffee on that. So that is it. that I have officially, and I just wanted to share that with you. I'd be glad to answer any questions that are coming already. Good.
You didn't tell why it's called Here's How.
Oh, well, what I've been told by why we're called Here's How is it's a play on words that when one of our delivery trucks would come up and they'd say, How's here, and then you flip it, Here's How. And that's how I was told that came about, just sort of a play on words, Here's How. So,
That's good.
yes.
Did you ever think about buying a chocolate company such as Shannon's or something like that?
You know, that's a great question. That is a great question. And you know, we have talked about that. Part of it is, and I'm not saying we're not open to that, part of it is you have to have the capital, you want to do it, the energy, and then somebody that's willing to integrate that and run it. Because as most of you know, if any business that you have is contingent upon who's running or managing that business, not only from an honesty and ethical standpoint, but from a vision. So if we were able to do that, we'd have to make sure we had the right person to do it, and then make sure that we thought we could either integrate it back into what we currently do, or that it could standalone business. There was a peanut brittle company a few years ago, but I kind of, if I had to do over, I think we should have pursued that one. It was in Ohio. And I think we may have pursued that one. But predominantly, we don't do a lot of chocolate, believe it or not. We are mainly a non-chocolate type of candy, because chocolate, you know, with the melting temperature and heat, you got to be careful of that. And we are on non-refrigerated trucks. It's higher price. So it would be a little bit of a different, you know, integration. But your point's well taken. We've wondered about that at times. Should we? So.
Do you still have, I believe it was monthly, get-togethers for the organizations
Yeah.
in town?
Oh, wait. Tell me what that one is. I was thinking you were going to go somewhere else with that
Oh,
question.
well, your mother, I remember, but I went there one time to talk about Meals on Wheels, and the employees could come in and
Yeah.
and they learned about the different organizations in town.
Well, we don't do that, but what we still do, and this is an interesting thing, historically, we have had for years on Mondays a little devotional period that tied back in, I think, to my grandmother, when people would come in for 15 minutes, just time for maybe prayer and share, voluntary, we never force it. But interestingly enough, when I went back to the company 35 years ago, that room was filled. You don't get very many people there anymore. You know, we still do it, it's still voluntary, and there's a handful of us that still show up just to kind of share prayer and concerns and stuff like that. But it's just times have changed. You know, we used to be able to go back, we would have a picnic every summer at the park, and I'll bet you there were summers we had at least 200 people there. We'd invite all the families. And then as time went on, it just was tougher. It just started waning. And, you know, I kind of looked in the mirror and said, what are we doing wrong? But then I talked to other people and realized how society had changed. Many of you have been around here long enough. That's a compliment, you're all wise. But you know, things have changed. Again, I'm not saying it's worse. I'm not going there. I'm not going to say, oh, the good old days, but I'm saying there's a difference in society, how families integrate. You know, so many people are walking around, I stuck my phone over there so it wouldn't ring, but how we communicate with one another and all that. The picnic used to be a great thing once a summer, and we get all the sales reps to come in, and it was a lot of fun. But now it's just hard. People are so busy doing things. But that event, we still do that. We still have that little Monday devotional, and that would have been one of the times that you came in.
You have a Facebook Live question.
Oh, somebody, who's that from my wife? I said she's
No.
probably the only person on.
From Eric in Michigan.
Okay.
What are the biggest trends happening in today's world that are affecting coffee, candy, and nut industries?
Okay. All right. You have to take those separately, okay, because he said coffee, candy, and nuts, all right? Coffee is really a growing industry in this sense. If you think about it, everyone in here's heard of Starbucks, right? Starbucks, when they came along, really elevated the entire industry, okay? Because people, before that it was just a cup of coffee. Starbucks turned it into something neat. It started getting a lot of attention at the category. So in a way, the coffee industry continues to grow in that, but it's not so much the black cup of coffee as it is all the different types of coffee-related drinks And also one of the things now is cold brew. You'll hear the word cold brew, which is different than just iced coffee. Cold brew is steeped, and there's whole industries going up with cold brew. You see ready to drink cold brew in grocery stores, and that's going to continue to grow. But if you go back a number of years ago, coffee dominated. When you all were growing up, I'm telling you, did you ever see a soft drink at 7 a.m. or 8 a.m.? No, you never saw that. Well, then that started changing because everyone started drinking Coke and Pepsi. Well, then when Starbucks comes along and some others, it elevates it. So in terms of coffee, that continues to go and trend with cold brew, coffee shops, and all kinds of spin-offs. Nuts, what you see there is a lot of snack mixes, okay? Nuts are a healthy alternative, okay? Depending on which nuts and how you do it, but there's all kinds of mixes, nuts on salads, all kinds of things that people are looking at now. Even though they have a high fat content, they're loaded with protein. So that trend is a positive thing. That, you know, there's a lot of good things coming out of nuts. And candy, I can tell you, it remains a stable. I mean, it's most candy sold is still chocolate. If you look at the percentages, chocolate is the largest percentage of candy sold. Don't hold me to this, but I almost want to say it's 70%. We're mainly in the non-chocolate. But again, it's still fun. It's a treat. People are still buying candy, and the industry, which I'm a part of, and I attend industry trade shows, we don't try to present it as anything else of what it is. We don't try to hide behind it or remake it. It's a treat. Now, you'll see some of the industry giants like Mars and Hershey buying up companies that can allow them to use their distribution channels in different snacks. But that continues to go. And it's fun for kids' candy. You can go to a candy show, and there'll be all kinds of new launches of different fun products and flavors and all that kind of stuff. So that's a good question, though. Is that Eric Garley?
Yep.
Oh my goodness. Thank you, Eric, for watching. What other questions? Any others? Yeah. Go ahead.
Well, I have read a couple things that say that chocolate is going to get more expensive because cocoa is going to become scarce. Is that a thing?
Let me tell you, I'm starting to get over my pay grade here, answering that question. So let me qualify that you're getting into some
I'm
areas.
not going to start a business.
No, I know you're not. But I will tell you that there are some, regardless of how anyone feels about global warming, I don't want to get into politics of that. There are some dynamics playing out over the course of that will extend beyond any of us, our lifetimes in here, frankly. That if it's not reversed, they wonder with some of the deforestation and some of the warming trends about coffee and cocoa and how those will play out over the next many decades.
Yeah.
Now, I don't poo-poo that. I'm not a scientist, and I think there's probably some truth to that. I'm also a believer in science being able to mitigate some of that within these countries. But I don't want to go there. You could probably read both sides of that, but that's probably what you're coming from, is the growing regions and how that's affected by weather and how they can breed plants and resisting it. There's a real science to this, even in the coffee side.
Yeah.
I mean, in the coffee side, I've been to Costa Rica, I've been to Kenya, I've been to Mexico, although I didn't see coffee there, and I've been to Hawaii as well too, and seen coffee. And there's a lot of science that goes into the production of cocoa and coffee. There's a lot of science. So I'm hoping that won't happen, but I read some of this stuff that it could if changes don't happen.
I didn't really get a lot of detail.
Yeah,
Just,
and I'd have to read that too. Part of me is a believer in our ability that it's such a worldwide commodity. Well, chocolate is. Coffee is the world's second largest commodity in the world behind oil. That's how big coffee is. Was there another question? Yeah.
Where all are you getting your coffee from? I toured O'Neill's, which I know is a competitor, but...
Actually, good friend.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, technically they're a competitor, but Joe Walsh is a good guy, good friend of mine. Speak highly of Joe.
But they told us where all they were getting their beans, and you know, the commercials on TV are always talking about the Colombian coffee and how that has become more and more bitter. If you notice that in like Folgers and Maxwell House.
Yeah. Coffee is an agricultural product we buy from many countries. We don't source directly from the countries. I go to brokers in New York because they're the ones that go in and they then have to make sure that they deal with all the customs, terrorism things that come in. I mean, it's a real business to try to get all this stuff in the United States. And again, I get it. You have to be careful of the supply chain. But we get them from Peru, Nicaragua, Salvador, Colombia, Mexico, Vietnam, Ethiopia, Kenya. We get a whole lot of those from all over. And then the key for us is you'll have blended coffee or single source. So if you want to buy just Kenya AA, we'll get you Kenya AA and we'll live with whatever the crop year is. With blended coffees, that's part of the art of blending, because as coffee is an agricultural product, some countries the price may vary, the taste may vary, and so part of our role in cupping coffee is trying to blend those coffees at the right price points so that our customers can't tell a difference in the blend.
And I was surprised over there, growing up, you always think it came from South America, but I was surprised how much came from Africa and Asia.
It is, and Vietnam, I think, may be the world's second largest producer now, and not many years ago, they didn't have hardly any coffee. Brazil's still number one. I think Vietnam's maybe 2 or 3, and then Colombia.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yes?
Talked about the nut blends that you have.
Mm-hmm.
What's happened to the cashew market in terms of, is it stable, going up, going down? I grew up on cashews because my father would come out to house and he'd go where you roast them.
Yes.
And then he'd pick out what he wanted.
Yes.
And so we always had cashews that we could eat in the house.
Well, I admit I'm not going to be able to answer that question. I think cashews have been fairly stable lately, but my brother-in-law Ernie, who's retired, he actually still does that for our business. He wants to stay busy, and he still actually sources and buys the nuts for us. He does other things, but day to day he's not involved in the business. But he still keeps his hand in that. And I didn't bring my sheet. He'll send an update every now and then on what's happening in the market. And I'm not keeping up with the price gyrations of that. And also it's affected by world consumption. That's the other thing. As much of the world has come out of let's put it this way, as a lot of the world moves to what we'll call another class level, okay, they move more into whether it's China or India, and you have people coming out of poverty, which is a good thing. I mean, not only from God's view, these are children that can move out of poverty, but they're consumers then. They are consuming a lot of the world's goods and services globally. And then depending on how that trade goes all over the world, it can shortchange us. We may pay more. And that's another reason why some of these tariff things that you're reading about in the news right now, it's a complicated thing. Because you want free trade. I'm a free trade open guy, but you want it to be fair and equitable. And that's tough to do. And a lot of times they try to manage it through political things. I get it. I'm not going into that. But if you think about the world coming up, the standards around the globe, they're consumers. And that goes back to cashews, because cashews are consumed globally. And they're a good product. But I can't tell you the price right now, although I don't think, Rachel, you might know more about that than I do. Haven't they been pretty stable?
I don't remember.
Okay.
Well, my wife is reluctant to buy it because the price has gone up so much.
Well, there you go. You know more than I do. You know more than I do.
Michaela said Vietnam is the second.
Okay, Vietnam's the second. There you go. So there was another question I saw back here. Yes.
What are the elements that allow a small regional coffee roaster to compete successfully with all the big guys?
Why do you ask so many good questions? That's a great question. And first of all, it's tough. It really is. In our company, there's a couple things. The coffee end of our business, for the most part, tends to be more food service oriented as opposed to retail. By food service, I mean restaurants, schools, nursing homes, and all that. But even that is a very competitive business, because you have a lot of people running around where coffee is one of many items that they bring in. They're bringing in soup, they're bringing in nuts, peas, meats, whatever. And we are specialists in that. So one of the ways we compete is try to specialize to realize coffee is one of the most profitable items on a menu. So we try to tell people, why not get a great coffee in there? It's the last thing your customers are going to remember as they exit the door. So service is one of the big things, trying to elevate the product itself. The final thing that we did, and this was back around 1977, we became part and signed up, and I don't want to get into too many details here, but we became part of a national organization that is now headed in fact, you heard me mention earlier about the company, the big roaster in Alabama, Royal Cup. So Royal Cup has national contracts. So we have an agreement that's been enforced for 30-some years, 40-some years, that we signed so that if they get national chain business, and let me give you an example. If you go out here to the mall, the Holiday Inn Express, Comfort Inn, a lot of the limited service hotels, if they get that business, we execute the delivery and function of that at our level. We would never be able to do that if we didn't have Royal Cup negotiating that. The advantage for our customers are they get pricing based on national volume, but if they have a problem, they can get a hold of me. They can get a hold of our staff locally in Western Pennsylvania, which is nice. They have the best of all worlds. And so there's about a handful of us that are part of this consortium. Royal Cup itself is so big that they can kind of control a lot of the United States. But that's another way we compete, by a sort of a marketing alliance. But the answer to your question is it's tough slugging. I mean, there's a lot of competition out there, which is good when you're a consumer and you're buying. Wonderful. I love competition when I'm a consumer, but every day when I put on my CEO hat, I think, oh, why is there so much competition? It's the flip side of it. Yes?
Yeah, I was wondering about these coffee makers, Keurig.
Yes.
And the market is the package.
Yes.
Can you say anything about that?
Yeah, I can. I can tell you this, the joke I tell people, if somebody come to my office 10 to 15 years ago and said, Mr. Beech, you're in the business, we've got this marketing plan, can give us 10 or 20,000 bucks. We're going to put coffee in these little cups, and we're going to sell them for about 30 bucks a pound and make people at home buy their own coffee maker, and that's how we're going to make our living. I'd say, I'm going to pass on this. Shows what I know. You know, I may have been the same guy that wasn't sure the outlet mall was going to go. It went big time. And what they did was they created a whole new merchandising for that line for coffee. What I now, looking back on, didn't comprehend was that they sold that as a convenience of being able to go from different blends, different days to hot chocolate and tea at 50, 60, 70 cents, whatever you pay for those things. They're very expensive. I worked the other way. Mentally, I thought, why would people buy that? You know, why couldn't you just buy a pound of coffee and you're paying 10 cents a cup instead of 50 or 70 or 80? They said, no, we're not competing against that. We're looking at what you stop at for the convenience store. You know, when you're paying $1.50 or $2 a cup in the morning, when people were stopping at that, they figured brewed at home, put it in, 70 cents, off you go. And that market just exploded. I mean, if you go into a grocery store now, what they have in grocery stores, they measure everything almost in 4 feet increments, and you can see the amount of space and all kinds of different coffees and all that. We have 4 that I have a contract in New York. We don't do a whole lot with it. Ours are organic. I knew that we couldn't compete price-wise because there'd be too many people out there, so we got all 4 of ours organic, and I have a made for, so we do sell some of those. But it's a competitive business, and I think it's kind of flat now. Now, it went like this. I mean, the growth trajectory was unbelievable, and I haven't studied what the numbers are, but I think it has finally started flatlining. I tell people, what I do is I have a single cup maker in my house, but I just take our bulk coffee, and you have those little inserts. I don't know if you know what I'm talking about. You just pour it in the insert. You know, it's the same thing, and then rinse out the insert, and you can still make 1 cup at a time, but you're buying coffee at a much less reduced price. But I got to count them.
So you don't see your customers expecting more of that?
You know, remember, most of our customers are food service. So in the consumer side, the individuals at home, sure, that's that, but we're not selling too much into that market. Ours are more when you're going into hotels, restaurants, they're not brewing it by the cup. Their volume has to be a lot bigger than that. And that the expenses would eat them up trying to brew it cup by cup by cup. It's just far less expensive to brew a half gallon at a time. And I'll tell you, the guy that invented that, I heard, regrets it because of all the landfill waste and all that kind of stuff. Did you hear that? Yeah.
Yeah, I read that.
So, any more questions? Was there another one I saw, or is that?
No, I was just going to
Yeah.
make a remark. I belong to the Mercer County Animal Response Team,
Yes.
and we had come to your company to see about getting a donation for like candies and stuff. We were putting on a big training session on a weekend, and you folks were very generous with us, and you gave us a nice big box of.
I was hoping this was going to have a good ending. Because I wasn't sure where this was going. So thank you for that.
It came from House.
Thank you for that. Yeah,
it was really nice.
Well, you're welcome.
Appreciate it.
And you're welcome. And we get asked a lot, and I would be lying to you if I said that we said yes to everybody because we're high profile and it's very difficult. But we try to help when it seems to make sense. And but I also don't want to say that we say yes to everybody. You kind of have to limit that.
Right.
So, but you're welcome. So, thank you for that. Thank you for that. Any other questions? Yes.
A lot of companies depend highly on advertising.
Do we?
What do you do?
Okay, here's my thoughts on that. Okay, here's the deal. And it's changing some now, but advertising, it used to think, depending on the larger you were, the bigger companies in our industry, think Hershey, think Mars, they could do a real shotgun approach because they could create brand awareness because their products were found everywhere. So you could do media advertising that would put it at top of the mind, Hershey, Mars, whatever, because there wasn't a store you couldn't go in that their products weren't found. We never had that luxury of being in. There's a lot of stores that we're not in. So what we have done historically is promote Target at the store level itself. So that rather than advertising, we would rather promote it at the store where someone goes in and they're offering our bags of candy with so many cents off, and we partner with the retailer to show a reduced price once the people are in the store, as opposed to an overall advertising halo. I will tell you, the whole idea of, you want to call it advertising through social media, is something that we are really exploring. We're on it now. As a matter of fact, look, Rachel was streaming this via Facebook Live. I joked that my wife would be the only one on, and how many people are on? 2 or 3 or 8?
13 now.
Yeah, I mean, that's amazing to me. 13 people are listening to this. I wouldn't have thought there'd been, I wouldn't listen to me. I wouldn't, let alone 13 people. But just to give you an example of the power of this, okay, there's an app called Snapchat. Is that right, Rachel? Is that it? Some of you may have heard of Snapchat. It's an app that you can go on. And so Snapchat is, you can kind of look at little things. And there is anyone here of Bruce Jenner, who now goes by Caitlyn Jenner, okay, has a daughter, Kylie Jenner. Okay? Kylie Jenner put out a tweet about Snapchat redid their format, the platform that they did on this app. Kylie Jenner put out a tweet that said, hey, is anybody else having problems with this upgrade that Snapchat did? That's all she said. In one day, the stock lost $1.6 billion in value because a 21-year-old woman
Complaint.
just simply said, hey, is anyone having problems about this? 1.6 B with a billion, not million. So what that says is the power of social media and how all this interacts is affecting it's affecting you just don't even know about it. Okay, but it's definitely affecting companies like ours about how we can go in and try to use that platform. Certainly we're not going to have that kind of impact, but find a way to connect with younger people. Younger people want to know where products are coming from, how they got to where they're, this whole transparency thing. There's a trust vault, and we are working on that because we have nothing to hide in our company. We're glad to share a lot of that. And you'll hear advertisements on TV, IBM, it's called blockchain. And basically what blockchain is, a funny thing to say, that you can take something from its source and follow it all the way through. And computer algorithms are going to be able to allow people to do that, so they can go online and find out if a diamond was mined somewhere and what each step of the way. And it's basically transparency, because a lot of young people today want to know that. They want to know where their products are coming from, how they got there, are they sourced responsible? And that's something that all of us in business, we're working on as well too. And we've got a lot of these social media things in place now. We've just got to figure out the tools and how to use it correctly. So we're working on that. It's pretty amazing. You don't have another question, do you, Rachel? I was looking back there. Yeah, it's quite interesting, and this is a side note that has nothing to do with Howe's, but there's a lot of big companies that have teams of MIT PhD mathematicians doing nothing but writing algorithms to figure out how products are moved throughout the channel and when companies post things and how they do that, and they're kind of at war with each other trying to do with it. That's what's happening, because when people log on, they want to know what prices and what SKU numbers and how they do that. Teams of people, just these are highly paid men and women doing nothing but computer algorithms, trying to figure out how all this society works and how it all ties in together. It's a whole new world, I'm telling you. I never thought I'd see some of this stuff. And I couldn't retire quick enough. That's the problem. I'm still in it. So, anything else? I didn't mean to talk this long, but you had some really good questions. So, I apologize if I went over your time limit.
No, there's no time limit. I do want to thank you. That was so interesting, Dick, and so well presented.
Well,
And with your handout, we'll find a nice place in our library and in our business room, because many people come in, and we have actually the curtains in our business room are the bags right from the.
oh, are they really? Oh
Yeah.
my goodness.
And that's one of the things we always tell the people who come in. So now we have more information to share with them. And as we have some refreshments here, and as we're having refreshments, if you have any other questions you want to.
Yeah, I'll be here. Again, thank you. I'm grateful, and a lot of great questions, and thank you. I hope you were able to listen as long as I could talk. So.
And for any of you that are just first time here or not members of the Historical Society, I'm going to do a little pitch, of course. Be sure and take one of our newsletters on the way out. And on the back of it is a membership application. We'd love to have you a member of our Historical Society, because we are completely a volunteer organization and depend completely on dues and donations to exist. And this old building takes a lot of funds to keep it going and keep it in good shape. So I appreciate you all coming and supporting us. Thank you.
Then we have house.
Next week we have
When to August.
Wendell, August, 7 o'clock, same place, same time, okay?
When is
Wendell, August is, we're happy.
Next Monday.
Next Monday night. Thanks.
No, I just do mine myself. Like that. We all have unlimited. We'll go over and I'll send you videos and everything else. No, one button clicks, and people can interact and comment as you're streaming. I do a little bit. I can certainly try sometime.